They thought you'd shatter. But silence forged steel where fragility once lived. They gambled everything on your forgiveness, mistook your patience for permanence, your warmth for weakness. They never imagined that the day would come when your absence would scream louder than your presence ever did. Regret doesn't knock. It infiltrates. Quiet. Venomous. It latches onto their peace, poisoning their memories until every laugh they shared with you curdles into guilt. They betrayed gold for glitter, discarded a soul that bled loyalty in a world starving for connection. But betrayal didn't end you. It resurrected you. You rose, not with vengeance but with purpose. Unrecognizable, unreachable. And while they rot in the ruins of what they wrecked, you walk through the fire they set, reborn in the flame, untouched by the smoke. The saddest part, they only understood your worth when they knew they could never touch it again. Darkness doesn't arrive with a bang, it creeps in. Quiet. Patient. It waits behind the mask of distraction, behind a facade of laughter, the busyness, the noise. Regret is not a hammer blow, it is a slow bleed. It doesn't claw at them in the middle of a party or while their phone lights up with meaningless messages. No. It waits. It waits until they are alone, until the quiet stretches long and the illusion of fulfillment thins. That's when it sinks in. That's when the memories come, not as warmth, but as thorns. Sharp, merciless, real. They didn't understand then, not really. They thought walking away was the end. They thought ignoring it long enough would kill it. They thought time would dilute the meaning, soften the edges, and numb the consequences. But regret has a longer memory than guilt. And it doesn't play fair. It seeps in like rot, silent and steady. It plants itself in the quiet hours of the night, in the seconds before sleep, in the aching pause between conversations. Regret shows up in reflections in the eyes that stare back in the mirror, knowing what they gave up, what they broke, what they'll never get to hold again. It shows up in the click of old messages, the echo of your voice they never recorded but still hear, haunting the halls of their emptiness. They buried it once, convinced themselves that what they did didn't matter. But regret is a liar with a perfect memory. It doesn't let go. It tightens its grip with time. The more they try to forget, the more it reminds them. The more they run, the clearer your silhouette becomes in the fog they left behind. You were never the storm. You were the sanctuary. You were the kind of rare they didn't know how to hold, so they let you go thinking there'd be another. Thinking they could come back to you later, once their ego was satisfied, once the world chewed them up and they needed softness again. But you weren't waiting. You weren't theirs to come back to. You never paused your life for their redemption arc. They lost you when they weren't looking, and now they can't unsee it. Every laugh they force now sounds a little hollow. Every new connection they try to forge feels a little more fragile, a little more fake. Because none of them are you. None of them see them the way you did before the cracks, before the walls. You knew them in ways no one else will, and now they live with that absence. They don't say your name out loud, but it weighs on their tongue. It shows in their silence. It bleeds through their deflection. And the most twisted part, they still think of you as the one they could have had they just been less selfish, had they just listened, had they just stayed. It's not anger they fear, it's the realization that the universe gave them a rare flame and they smothered it because they weren't ready to feel the heat. And now, regret is the only fire left, burning through their excuses, devouring their denials, leaving nothing but ash and echo. You gave them something sacred and they treated it like it was disposable. Now they walk through life with full hands but an empty soul. You, on the other hand, aren't broken. You were forced to look into the void they left and find a version of yourself that didn't need their validation to breathe. While they dig through old memories, hoping to feel something real again, you built a life that doesn't even glance in their direction. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about bitterness. This is about evolution. Their regret is the consequence of their blindness. Your resilience, that's the monument to what they lost. And this is just the beginning. They had something irreplaceable in their hands, and they crushed it as if it were ordinary. As if the kind of soul you are walks in every day, smiling with open arms, with a heart too big for a world this shallow. You gave them something raw, something pure in honesty that doesn't exist in casual smiles or flirty conversations or moments soaked in pretense. You were the shelter, the rare light in a world that mostly flickers and fades. But they were too small to see it. They fed off your softness, drank from the well of your loyalty like it was owed. They grew comfortable in your presence, arrogant in your patience. They laughed when you forgave, thinking it was permission to hurt you again. They saw the way you showed up every damn time and assumed you'd always be there. That no matter how many pieces they shattered you into, you'd rebuild yourself just to offer them comfort again. But they missed something. You weren't weak. You were holding back the storm. They took from you your time, your trust, your truth, and handed back empty words, hollow intentions, smoke and mirrors. You gave them clarity and they answered with confusion. You gave them your soul and they measured it against their ego. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. Mockery of what's rare. Mockery of something sacred. But here's what they never counted on. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was survival. When you finally stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped pouring love into a cup that only held cracks, you became something they can't even recognize anymore. They chased attention, you carried presence. They wanted validation, you offered devotion. And now they're empty, wandering through a world full of faces that all feel the same, hoping someone will make them feel what you once did. Spoiler, no one will. Because you weren't just someone. You were the one. You knew them in ways they didn't even understand themselves. You caught the things they tried to hide. You stayed when it was ugly. And in their foolishness, they thought that kind of love was a weakness, that it made them superior. But the joke's on them now. because they were never in control. They were simply beneficiaries of your grace. And now that it's gone, they're exposed. Every connection they try to forge now tastes like ash, because their soul remembers what real felt like. And it doesn't get that twice. You're not angry anymore. That part's dead. You're not sitting in the ruins asking why. You walked through that fire and let it melt the parts of you that begged to be seen. What came out on the other side? Untouchable, unapologetic, unbreakable. They lost you the day they believed they could keep wounding you without consequences. They thought your love was a leash, when it was actually a gift. And gifts, real ones, aren't given twice to those who waste them. Now they're haunted not by your words, but your absence. It echoes, louder than any scream you could have unleashed. And they'll keep chasing ghosts in people who can't replicate your depth, drowning in conversations that can't pierce the surface, forever looking for something they threw away like it was nothing. And you've stopped waiting for closure. You became the closure. You don't need apologies. You don't need recognition, because your worth was never tied to their acceptance. It was forged in your own fire. In the nights you faced your reflection and refused to let it kill your spirit. In the wounds you stitched shut with trembling hands. In the way you stayed kind even when it was undeserved. And now, everything about you radiates what they couldn't destroy. You've become the lesson they were never ready to learn. And this storm, it's far from over. They thought they left you shattered, another casualty of care, another quiet soul sitting in the ruins of a love they took for granted. They thought their betrayal would be the final cut, the one that'd silence your spirit and bend your spine. That you'd remain there, in the aftermath, waiting, eyes still searching, heart still open, begging for the return of something long dead. But betrayal didn't kill you. It resurrected you. And what rose from those ashes no longer looks like the person they left behind. Because something changed in you, not suddenly, but violently, like a tidal shift beneath the surface. The kind of change no one sees coming until it's too late to undo. You stopped begging for clarity. You stopped wishing for the past to crawl back. You stared into the hollow echo of what used to be and decided to become your own damn rescue. No savior. No apologies. Just fire and forward motion. They underestimated you. That was their first mistake. They mistook love for weakness. Mistook silence for submission. Mistook the pain in your eyes for proof that you needed them to fix you. But what they failed to grasp is this: when someone like you is broken, they don't stay shattered. They sharpen. You didn't rebuild yourself the same way. You came back forged steel where there was softness, purpose where there once was pleading. You've changed, not out of choice, out of survival. You stopped needing closure because you found clarity in your scars. You stopped waiting for redemption because you realized your worth wasn't bound to someone else's guilt. You saw how easily they let you bleed, how quickly they forgot the fire you held in your hands. And so you turned that pain inward, not to destroy yourself, but to ignite a transformation they could never reverse. And now the version of you that stands today is untouchable. You don't move the same. You don't love with the same naivete. You don't offer your soul to those who flinch at depth. You've become calculated where you once were giving, disciplined where you once overflowed. Not because love is a weakness, but because giving it to the wrong hands is a death sentence. And you've already died once. They can't reach you now. Not because you're hiding, but because they no longer recognize what they left. They look at you and see shadows of the person they abandoned, a face they once knew but now can't access. They try to trace old paths in your eyes, but those roads are gone. The person who once waited for their return died in the wreckage they caused. And in that absence, someone stronger was born. They feel it now in the pit of their stomach, in the silence that follows every failed connection. That gnawing emptiness, that's the ghost of what they lost. That's the voice that whispers late at night, reminding them that loyalty like yours isn't something you stumble upon again. That rare doesn't repeat. That once you lose a soul like yours, all that remains is a graveyard of almosts and what-ifs. You don't hate them. There's no point. You've outgrown the need for resentment. What lives in you now isn't revenge, it's realization. You've seen what you are capable of becoming when you have nothing left to lose. And that kind of self-awareness, that's freedom. So let them ache. Let them live with the knowledge that the best version of love they ever knew now walks this world without them. Let them watch from a distance as you thrive with armor crafted from every lie they told, every promise they broke, every piece of yourself you had to bury in order to survive them. This version of you doesn't break, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. This version of you has no room for ghosts. Only fire. Only forward. They expected rage. They expected venom in your voice, fury in your words, fire in your eyes. Because that's how people react when they're hurt, right? When they've been ripped apart by betrayal and bled dry by empty promises, they scream, they burn it all down. That's what they braced for. They steeled themselves for your explosion. But it never came. You didn't burn them. You forgot them. And that's the cruelty they never saw coming. Because nothing cuts deeper than being erased from the soul you once thought you owned. Nothing is more suffocating than realizing the storm you caused never had your name etched in its destruction. You weren't a target, they were a passing thought. And now, not even that. You moved on without theatrics. You didn't post cryptic quotes or send those desperate late-night texts. You didn't spiral. You ascended. Quiet. Ruthless in your stillness. And while they lie awake, replaying every choice that led to your silence, you're out there living a story that no longer includes them. That silence isn't passive. It's loaded. It screams, you don't matter anymore. You stripped them of significance the way they once stripped you of dignity. You didn't need revenge. You became the absence that haunts them more than any scream ever could. And here's the truth they'll never admit. They want your anger. They crave it. Because anger still means you feel. It means they still have power, that there's still a character in your story. But you've turned the page, burned the book, rewritten the narrative without their name anywhere in the chapters that follow. Now they stare at a void where your attention used to be. They chase updates, scroll through remnants, dissect every silence like it might still contain a trace of you. But your indifference is a black hole. It pulls them in, but gives nothing back. They look for signs of a second chance in everything. In songs, in dreams, in the faces of strangers they hope might trigger your memory. But they don't realize they're not in your rear view. They're in your past. Buried. Closed. Archived. And that's what shatters them the most. Not the loss. Not the guilt. But the fact that you've grown beyond the need to hate them. You outgrew their chaos. Outpaced their toxicity. Outlived the version of yourself that once saw their betrayal as the end. Now, they're the ones screaming into the void. And all they're met with is silence. Unmoving. Unforgiving. Absolute. This is what real power looks like. This is what becoming untouchable feels like. And this is how your story ends, with you unshaken, unmatched, and utterly free. They played God in a story they never truly understood. They wrote the ending before they learned the chapters. Moved their pieces like puppeteers, confident the strings would hold, that your heart would bend without ever breaking. They thought they were the architects of your destruction, the authors of your silence. They underestimated the one thing they couldn't control, your ability to rise. Because control was the illusion. And they fed off it like fire feeds on oxygen, self-assured, inflated, untouchable. They believed walking away made them powerful. That leaving you behind, hollow and broken, made them victorious. That betrayal wasn't just a choice, it was a statement. But they didn't destroy you. They unleashed you. And now, in the deafening silence of their own making, they face the truth. Power without purpose is a curse. Manipulation without love is a hollow game. And control. It means nothing when what you tried to control is now untouchable. They stand in the ruins not just of your relationship, but of their own delusion. Eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, from fighting battles with shadows. Memory is a cruel mirror. It reflects not just what was, but what could have been. And they see it now, your laughter, your loyalty, your unwavering presence like gold sifted from ash, gleaming in the wreckage. You weren't a chapter. You were the whole damn book. A story they barely started reading before they decided it wasn't worth the effort to understand. They lost more than love. They lost meaning. Because you didn't just love, you poured. You protected. You saw. And in a world drunk on superficial connections, being truly seen is a form of salvation. But they tossed that away, too intoxicated with ego to see the sanctuary they were burning. And now they see you. Not the version they used to manipulate. Not the one they believed would chase. But the aftermath. the evolution, the silence. You don't hate them. Hate implies energy, investment, memory. You don't even think of them anymore. But they think of you all the time. And the thought is unbearable. Because they know now they weren't in control. They never were. You were the axis their world quietly spun around, and by the time they realized it, the galaxy had shifted. You are not just gone. You're beyond. Beyond reach. Beyond repair. Beyond their shallow apology and their too late awakening. They gambled something irreplaceable. And this time, the house didn't lose. They did. Entirely. Eternally. No second chances. No alternate ending. Only silence. Only consequence. Only you undefeated. They can lie to the world. They can dress the story in justification, wrap it in excuses, even sell it to themselves as survival. But the truth, it's a silent predator and it always catches up. At first, it's manageable. They rewrite the narrative with trembling hands, frame themselves as the misunderstood hero, paint you as fragile, emotional, replaceable. They rehearse it until it starts sounding real. You were too much. They had to walk away. It was for the best. But those are just lines in a script built on sand. And time has a way of dissolving delusion. Because even the best fiction crumbles under the weight of memory. And the absence you left, it's not a void. It's a mirror. One they can't avoid. One that reflects the version of themselves they can't escape from, the version that took something beautiful and desecrated it out of fear, cowardice, or ego. That absence grows. Not just around them, but inside them. Quiet, heavy, suffocating. They'll try to fill it with noise, with others, with moments meant to distract, not heal. But nothing fits. No voice sounds the same. No touch lingers. No laughter hits the way yours did. Because you weren't a placeholder. You were presence, depth, truth. And truth doesn't get replaced. So they spiral not in flames, but in silence. In the kind of ache that doesn't scream but hums, constant, brutal, inescapable. They replay every look, every word, every time they could have stayed and chose to run. They scroll through the highlight reel of your grace, wondering how the hell they let it slip. They'll convince themselves they had to do it. That they had no choice. That the timing wasn't right. That you weren't right. Until one day, maybe years from now, they'll wake up to a silence they can't ignore. Not outside. Inside. A hollow throb they can't outrun. And the truth will land like iron. They ruined the one thing that truly saw them. They'll sit in rooms full of noise, surrounded by half-hearted smiles and shallow touches, but none of it will fill the space you left. Because you weren't just love, you were reflection. You were healing. You were the mirror that showed them not who they pretended to be, but who they could have become. And they chose fear. And now, Now fear is all they have. Fear that they'll never be seen that way again. Fear that no one will ever love their worst parts and still choose them. Fear that their chance at redemption died the day you stopped believing they'd earn it. You are not mourning anymore. You've long since buried the version of yourself that waited for answers. You've risen. Your life flows in directions they'll never touch. You don't hate them. That would give them too much. What you carry now is distance measured, earned, and final. And the irony. They taught you everything you needed to become who you are now. And you were their chance to become better. They lost it. Forever. They'll try. Oh, they'll try like hell. Swiping through faces that all blur into the same hollow promise. Leaning into conversations that echo with emptiness. They'll dress it up in smiles, in forced laughter, in bodies that feel warm but never safe. They'll chase adrenaline, confuse chemistry for connection, mistake convenience for closeness. But none of it will touch the place you once lived. Because you weren't just a partner. You were home. And homes like that aren't rebuilt. They're once in a lifetime. What they had with you. It wasn't just about words or comfort or compatibility. It was soul recognition. Depth that scared them. Understanding that stripped their lies bare. You didn't just know their habits, you saw through them. You didn't flinch when they showed their darkness, you stayed. That kind of connection terrifies those who built their lives on masks. So they ran. And now they haunt their own life looking for a substitute. But every new face lacks the fire. Every new laugh fades too fast. They'll hold hands that feel colder. They'll hear "I love you" from mouths that don't know them. Because no matter how close they try to get, no one will ever reach the depth you swam in like it was second nature. You weren't a chapter, they were barely an annotation in your story. They thought love like yours was common because you made it look easy. Because you gave without conditions. But loyalty like that doesn't come twice. And while they're chasing ghosts in other bodies, you've rewritten yourself into someone they wouldn't even recognize. And that's the hardest part for them now, realizing the only version of you they ever had access to is gone. Irrevocably. That they were the villain in the best thing that ever happened to them. That the person they now wish they could be for you no longer matters. Because you are no longer looking back. You're legendary now. Unreachable. Scarred, but standing. And there's not a single lie they can tell themselves that will fill the crater you left. This was never about revenge. This was about resurrection. And your absence. That's the legacy they'll live with. For a lifetime. They always believed they'd have access to you. That no matter the damage, the silence, the choices they made, you'd remain there. Waiting. Longing. A constant they could drift back to when the world felt cold. Because that's who you were, wasn't it? Steady. Loyal. Forgiving to a fault. But what they never understood is that even the most patient soul has limits. That even the deepest love has a breaking point. That loyalty is a gift, not a sentence. And once it's withdrawn, there is no return. They never saw the shift happen. They were too distracted by their own ego, too busy writing narratives where they were always the hero, always in control. They thought your heart was a revolving door, one they could walk through when it suited them, leave again when it didn't. But one day, they turned the handle, and it didn't budge. Silence answered them. Because you are not there anymore. Not just emotionally. Existentially. You burned the bridge they thought they built. You've erased the entry point. The version of you they knew, the one that bent, broke, waited, wept, is dead. And what replaced it is someone they will never know. They'll convince themselves you're just hurt. That you'll come back once the sting fades. That people like you don't stop loving, they pause. But time is not on their side anymore. Every second that passes is another nail in the coffin of what they destroyed. You're not hiding. You're healed. They'll look for signs, crumbs, clues that you're still watching, still wondering. But they won't find any. Because when you close a door, it's final. You didn't slam it for drama. You sealed it for peace. And now, they stand in front of that closed door with hands full of what ifs. Faces flushed with too late revelations. Hearts pounding with panic dressed as clarity. But reality doesn't care about their timing. And neither do you. They lost you. Not to someone else. Not to distance. But to themselves. To their own choices. Their own betrayal. Their own arrogance. And now they wake up every day in a world where you are not only gone but unreachable. A phantom love they'll chase in every face, every conversation, every fleeting moment that almost feels like something, but never quite does. Because there's no substitute for something divine. You were rare. They were reckless. And this is the cost. A lifetime of doors that never open. 1,000 faces that never feel like home. A heart full of echoes, calling out for someone who no longer exists in their world. And will never return. Time doesn't forget. They thought they could outpace it, that distance would dilute damage, that distractions would dissolve consequence. That the clock ticking forward could somehow outrun the echo of what they'd done. But time is not a healer for them. It's a traitor. They betrayed you, assuming they'd suffer no backlash. That you'd be just another lesson, another bruise that fades. That someday, they could retell the story with themselves as the victim. And time would clean up the blood. But the truth is, time doesn't clean. It magnifies. It lays their betrayal bare in stark light, pulling back every curtain of denial they've tried to draw over their conscience. At first, maybe they smiled. Maybe they celebrated their freedom, drunk on their own ego. Convinced that walking away from something real made them powerful. They might have even paraded it, convinced themselves you were just another chapter, and a short one at that. But what they didn't realize was that you were the turning point. The part of the story that gave the whole damn narrative weight. And now the pages after you feel empty, forced, soulless. Regret doesn't scream. It whispers endlessly. It follows them into every quiet moment. It lingers in the stillness between conversations. It plays in the pauses between lovers' breaths. And worst of all, it invades the victories, the moments that should feel fulfilling but somehow ring hollow. Because no achievement can silence the truth, they traded something whole for something temporary. They thought their actions would fade. But with every tick, the cost compounds. Birthdays pass. Anniversaries of nothingness. Silent reminders that time isn't healing anything, it's marking every moment without you. Every milestone becomes a wound. Every memory, a weight. They'll see reflections that almost feel like you. Hear words spoken by others that echo yours but without the same soul. Feel warmth, but never home. They'll spend years rewriting the past, trying to justify the unjustifiable, trying to paint their betrayal as survival. But time will betray them by refusing to let them forget. Because truth never expires. And you are not watching anymore. You are not hoping they change. You are not waiting for a redemption arc they were too cowardly to earn. You've carved peace from pain. You built a world where their name is irrelevant, their memory powerless, their presence erased. They'll carry the weight of losing you until their last breath, and even then, it won't be enough to repay what they broke. This is their forever now, haunted not by what they did but by who they lost. And as the dust settles, remember this. Dark Triumphs isn't just a name. It's a declaration. A war cry for every soul who's been shattered and rebuilt stronger. For the ones who were doubted, dismissed, betrayed and still rose. Here, we don't chase light. We become it. One scar at a time. One truth at a time. One triumph at a time. This is where pain becomes power. And silence becomes legacy. Welcome to Dark Triumphs, where your story doesn't end in the darkness. It begins there. Fire, subscribe. Survive. Rise.